Today's episode is sponsored by No Strings Attached e-News, your premier online magazine with interesting and informative articles from lifestyle, entertainment, and news worldwide. Visit the website to find out what's buzzing on nsaen.com. Welcome to the talk show Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. The goal of this show is to provide a learning experience to people of all ages, with guests from various fields in academics, a wide range of industries, and insight into the many forms of art, athletics, and entertainment. We hope you enjoy the show. Filmmaker Stephanie Gardner is today's guest. Stephanie will talk about her series, Cinema Nomad.
Stephanie Gardner, welcome to Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to be here.
A pleasure to have you. Stephanie, when did you first get that filmmaking bug?
Oh gosh, that actually came later in life, but I always had a writing and directing and music bug. So I went to grad school entering as a playwright, but I went to a very film-focused program and just kind of got seduced by filmmaking as a medium where I could combine all my artistic interests into one.
And where did you go to school?
It was NYU-Tisch, but it was actually a satellite program they had set up in Singapore. So I spent the whole 2-year master program in Singapore at NYU.
I don't know. It sounds like you're not happy unless you're in 35 different countries.
I guess so. I definitely caught the travel bug, and being in Southeast Asia and having the ability to kind of more easily travel from country to country over there kind of helped spark that bug, I think.
Well, let's go from the genesis though. So what made you interested in playwriting or in writing in general?
I don't know. It was always in me. My first grade teacher tells me that I wrote a full-length play in her first grade class. I had a old typewriter at home and actually typed it out on a typewriter. And I think I was the youngest of 4 girls, all girls, in a very strong-willed family that encouraged, free thinking and expression. And we all ate dinner together, and you kind of, as the youngest, had to fight for the last word. And so, I'm just guessing that maybe that helped me get involved. But also, all my older sisters were in the theater programs throughout high school, so I watched them all go through that. And I used to write stories, either recruit my sisters, my friends, stuffed animals, anything that would act out my stories. And I think that naturally just led to also being a director.
Right. Well, that's so interesting because many of the people I interview, if they're actors, they tell me how they used to be or still are writers and they want to be producers and directors. And you started as a playwright. So I guess it really is helpful to have those different positions in the film industry. Have you ever been in front of the camera?
Unfortunately, yes. I had the acting bug when I was younger and even wrote, that's how I started writing more seriously too. I thought, well, I'll just write myself the part. So in high school, I actually put on a full-length musical comedy that I had written, directed, and produced, and I starred myself in it. I don't think I'm a great actress. I didn't love being on stage, but what I really loved was hearing the audience react to the words and to the music, and then also being able to work with a community of people to bring that to life. So I think at that point, when I was 16, I realized I really wanted to be a writer, director. I have since been on camera. I really am awkward on camera, but you will see me on camera for Cinema Nomad. I've also acted in my own nonfiction short, but my own fiction short. That was more of an exercise because I think you can become a better director if you understand the role of an actor, but I don't love acting on camera or having myself on camera.
It's interesting because you stole my next question because it's usually, do you like being in front of the camera or behind? But when you say, unfortunately, yes, we pretty much let the cat out of the bag on that one. So now we talk about honing skills because you have the passion. But what type of education did you need to gain the skills needed to both write and produce film projects?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-part answer because I'm an academically minded person anyway, so I went the school path. I went the university path. I got a undergrad and then the master's. I don't think you need that to do what I do. I think you learn a lot by doing, by trial and error, by getting out on a film set and learning. I guess what's slightly different about my path is even though I went to a film school, I really did go in as a writer. The whole program was about writing. It only loosely covered the actual arts of filmmaking. And so once I got out of that master's program in Singapore, I actually moved back to New York and knew already I wanted to pursue filmmaking in addition to theater. So I kind of, what I say, took myself to film school. I bought a handheld video camera. At the time, they were the ones that kind of looked like a Coke can. And I decided to make 10 short films in 10 months. Having the training in theater, but very little training in film, in actual film directing, film production. And I thought that was a way to learn. So I kind of found people around New York City, learned how to hire a crew, learned how to work with a cinematographer versus, lights versus sound. And so every month for those 10 months, I was in pre-production, production, and post-production of 3 different short films. I also kind of forced myself to learn the basics of editing. So that kind of allowed me to see what I was getting it helped me as a director because I could see what I was shooting and what I wasn't by what I had on the cutting room floor. And so I just kind of, by trial and error, forced myself to learn that and to learn from those who were already more trained than me, who I was bringing on to help me.
Well, yeah, it's great that you can learn from other people, and there's so many different aspects. I was always amazed as a teenager going to movies, and then as an adult, when you see they scroll the credits, it's like there's more people on the credits than watch the movie. It's unbelievable what goes into this. And you talked earlier about the reaction, or you liked the reaction when you wrote something that was on stage. What are you looking for as far as a reaction in a film? Because you don't get that live right there feedback. So how is that different when it comes to filmmaking and getting the feedback from people who see your work?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because I don't think I think too much in advance about the reaction for filmmaking. I think for me and a lot of other, creative artists out there, it comes from something deep within that you kind of have to pursue. And so once you get that bug of a story or a project that you say, okay, this for some reason is important to me, and sometimes you don't even understand at first why it's important to you. Um, you know, for me as a writer and director, it might be processing an emotion. It might be like a theme in the world that I've kind of gotten drawn to, lots of different reasons. But once I start, I just do it with a full heart to the best of my ability and do it for myself and the community that's helping me do it. And if we do it well enough for ourselves, I think there will be an audience out there. I hope people react differently. I think art is something that can equally cause you to think, feel, process, emote. Sometimes you don't know as the audience member what you're feeling or why. Sometimes you think about it years later. Sometimes you think about it right there in the theater. But for me, it's all about if different people have different reactions, then I've done something right.
I love the fact that you state that people react differently. And now it brings us to full circle because now we have this tremendous, exciting new project. So what can you tell us about Cinema Nomad?
Sure. Cinema Nomad is an art and culture focused travel series, international travel, that explores each country through the life and lens of a 30-something-year-old film director in that country. And it blossomed out of a larger cross-cultural project I created over 6 years ago now called 33andMe. It was the 33andMe film project I created as I was turning 33 years old myself. And I just had this bug, this spark of an idea where I wanted to travel the world to meet other film directors my age. 33-year-old film directors in 33 different countries so that I could learn about their lives, careers, cultures, what were their obstacles, how were they overcoming the many, many challenges of being a filmmaker. But they were doing it too all over the world. And so I wanted to both learn from them, but also then come back and share their stories, potentially in a film festival, which we ended up putting on as well.
Well, so give us a short master class, if you will, in how you take an idea such as Cinema Nomad. Fabulous idea. If I met you and we were having coffee, I'd say, wow, that sounds so interesting. But how do you take an idea such as Cinema Nomad and turn it into a reality?
Gosh, how many hours do you
Yeah,
have?
exactly. I said brief because I knew it's a long story.
Um, s- Again, I guess it was just a little bit of grit, perseverance, and trial and error. I mean, I'm the type of person that when I have an idea like that, like my musical in high school, like this, I just had to do it. So I don't think rationally, which isn't necessarily the best advice. Like I don't think of the things I should think about. I don't have the money to do this. I don't have the name recognition. I don't have XYZ. I kind of ignore all that and just say, okay, how are we going to do this? And the only way to do something that large in such a spark, a short amount of time, because this was probably 6 months before my 33rd birthday, I said, okay, I'm going to do this.
Mhm.
Um, you kind of just have to take it day by day, one step at a time, and cross your fingers and hope it goes well. And that's kind of what we did. I was very lucky because early on, my significant other, Tiz, whom I had really only known closely for about a year and a half by the time we embarked. But he's a filmmaker also, and he decided to drop everything and come with me. And without him, the project would have been very different. He's very skilled at cinematography, at lighting. He also did the same thing. He learned areas of filmmaking he wasn't already expert on to help pitch in with the project. Um, then it's just, I guess, building a community and keeping going. That's
Well,
a very short answer. There's a lot
yeah,
that's
I'm sure there's a
involved
lot.
that go into
Absolutely.
it.
It's funny because when you say that Tiz dropped everything and decided to come with me, you almost said it like if my wife said, "Do you want to go shopping?" All right, I'll drop everything and go with you. We're talking about so many different countries. I mean, everything was dropped. You couldn't do what you did and go to all those countries. So my first question about the Cinema Nomad itself is, how did you find these people? There's no book that you open up and says, please look for all people in their 30s who are filmmakers in other countries. So you have the idea. How did you find these people? Because we're going to talk about some of the countries you visited. How'd you find them?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because actually I did open a book. It was the World Travel Guide from Lonely Planet. That is a very thick book that has only 1 or 2 pages for every single country in the world. And so what I actually did first was kind of create a map of the world and where I wanted to go. And I decided really early on I wanted to hit every region in the world as much as possible in proportion to the whole world, which is harder than it sounds because 33 plus countries sounds like a lot, but when you're talking about over 192 countries in the world, it's really not. And I didn't want to just focus on the obvious cinephile countries in, say, Western Europe.
Mhm.
And so I kind of divided it up. I said, okay, I can have 4 or 5 countries from South America, 5 or 6 countries from Africa, this many from Europe, this many from Asia. So I started like that and then kind of looked through this book and said, oh, this might be interesting. This might be. Eventually to actually find the filmmakers, a whole variety of ways. It could be word of mouth. It could be I would contact, the local film festivals or the local film schools or film commissions. Tiz himself actually had his own very prestigious international short film festival in Taos for many, many years. So we use that alumni network a lot at the beginning. My alumni network from Tisch Asia, a lot of those filmmakers are scattered around the world. They help me find other people as well. Sometimes it was a 7 degree of separation thing.
Right. Well, that's so interesting because I've worked with I taught for over 30 years and I've worked with and done some work with teachers in England and we share there are some similarities, but I remember when I wrote my memoir, I donated books to a school in Uganda and I talked to the teacher first because he wanted to do a discussion with the author. He wanted me to come on Zoom, which we did. But I have to tell you, we as teachers we were talking, and there were many similarities, but then there were some things that floored me. Call it being naive or whatever. But he was saying the first time we were supposed to do it, he said we have to reschedule this because we're not going to have school for a couple of months because the election didn't go so well.
Yep.
So that is not something that I've ever heard a teacher say before. We've had elections not go so well before, but it never stopped school for a couple of months. So I was really taken aback by the level of danger that existed near the school. So I'm telling you this because I'm guessing you were in so many different countries. There are similar struggles with making films, all these young
Oh,
filmmakers you spoke to. But
absolutely.
tell me some of the similarities, but I want to hear some of the crazy differences that people in this country don't have to deal with when it comes to the large task of making a film.
Sure. And there are equal similarities and differences. I mean, the similarities are the process of making the film is the same everywhere. The need for funding to make your own film and make your own art is the need for everything. We ask every filmmaker at what point, at one point, what is the biggest challenge in your country for being a filmmaker? And I've had to amend the question because every single person, whether you're in Europe or, Togo, is going to answer the same thing first, money, like funding, lack of funding. The second common answer is lack of distribution. So I always say, okay, other than funding, which we now know is an issue, even for the more affluent filmmakers, for the less, it's always an issue. What's the biggest challenge? Um, and it can be anything from government censorship. Sometimes censorship is very literal. You know you're being censored and these are the rules, and you kind of have to decide like where you're going to fit on the spectrum of fitting within those rules or not versus the consequences. That's very real. I would actually say in far more countries than we expected. That was one of the surprises was that we found there were a lot more countries that restrict those types of freedoms than actually allow for them. Um, Second struggles can be, lack of available resources, whether it's getting your hands on a camera, whether it's, getting your hands on a qualified crew. A lot of the filmmakers we met, like our filmmakers in Guyana and in Sri Lanka, they're really, taking themselves up by the bootstraps and just out of a pure passion, teaching themselves, whether it's learning from watching YouTube videos or watching other Hollywood movies or other movies from around the world. Um, our filmmaker in Guyana actually became so passionate about it. He taught himself. There's no film school there. There are no film studios. He taught himself and he became pretty good. And so he decided to start creating a workshop for other people interested because he said, I can't be a filmmaker without other filmmakers. We need a community to make films. So I don't know everything. I'm still learning, but let me train the next generation and then we can work on films together. And I just think that's remarkable. Um, those are a few of the many, many, many challenges.
I'm sure. I mean, I've interviewed filmmakers from different parts of the globe, and money's always number one. Number two and number three is always very different and even more interesting. But sure, you need the money and the funds to do that. And some of these people have gotten funds from the government itself. Um, on my show, though, Stephanie, we often talk about the story behind the glory. So, what struggles did you have to overcome in order to achieve success in your industry?
Yeah, I mean, the struggles are many as a filmmaker. The obvious struggles that we've already talked about are real and never really go away. Always fundraising, always having to adapt and learn new trades, and also, having to kind of survive in a what's become a very oversaturated market, which is good and bad. It's, the more people who have the access to make films, the more democratic it is, the better, but the more options you as a viewer have to watch. So how do you get your work seen and heard and understood and all of that? I think for me, some of the biggest challenges are, filmmaking is all encompassing mentally, physically, emotionally. And when you're putting everything into it 24/7, it, like I said earlier, you kind of throw rationality out the window. It's like, how do you balance that passion project with making a living and paying your bills and having a personal life and, eating healthy and all these things. So I think that's always a struggle is balancing that personal well-being and staying my whole life it's always been this tug of war between I've always been like kind of a rebellious artist in a sense where I don't care about a high-paying job. I don't care about making money off my films. I just care about getting it done and making it. But that's not practical, especially the older you get and the more the bills pile up. But, especially if you are making films and you're making them happen, somehow you're spending money making them happen. So how do you balance the money you don't have to make it with making it well enough? And then there's the emotional aspect, which is, you know, balancing like the emotion behind why you're making it and not becoming overwhelmed by that. And for me, with this switch to Cinema Nomad, it's really my first foray into documentary, seriously. I like fiction filmmaking and I very much want to go back to fiction filmmaking. But there's a very high responsibility with documentary and with travel. And to be able to balance that, because first and foremost, I wanted to connect one-on-one with these filmmakers in as authentic way as possible. Yet if you bring a camera to that situation, it's always going to change things. And as a foreigner traveling in another country, you can do the best possible to be respectful, learn the norms, learn the cultural situations, but you're always going to have this, you might fluff something up unintentionally, but that's part of it. And so I struggle with that as well, with being as ethical as possible while making this documentary series.
What an honest and transparent response. That response should be shown in film schools. Seriously, I mean, you really covered the whole gamut. I'm guessing the people that you met and their stories far exceeded your hopes and expectations. What stories resonated most with you?
Oh gosh, that was the crazy thing is my biggest fear was, oh, this will get repetitive and boring, and it never did. Every filmmaker I met exceeded my expectation, and I left humbled and inspired by them. I think I might have sent you our Romania episode.
Mhm.
That one's an easy one to come to mind. Teddy Nekula, he's considered the first disabled film director to come out of Romania. And that's because he was born right at the end of Ceausescu's years. And under Ceausescu, any child born disabled was supposed to be sent back to a state-run orphanage. And it wasn't a good situation. And Teddy's parents bravely kept him. They said, no, we're going to keep this child. And fortunately, Ceausescu fell after that, and Teddy was able to blossom and he became a filmmaker. But he embraces all of this story, and he actually uses that. His reason behind filmmaking is to inspire other people with his own life story. So I found that really remarkable. Our filmmakers in Azerbaijan, for instance, face very high levels of government censorship. Our one filmmaker there, Oktay, he does mainly social justice documentaries to try to better society. So he's not, hiding behind the mask of like a science fiction story kind of thing. He's going out there and telling the truth he wants to tell, yet he's in his earlier career really got warned very severely by the government not to go any further. And so he also has a family. He also cares about protecting his family and that balance of family life and filmmaking. He's learned where the line is and what not to cross while still telling the stories that matter. But it's a really tightrope kind of thing. And so that was always inspiring to me. And there are just so many. Like our filmmaker in Uzbekistan, we reached out to the Uzbekistan Films Commission. I knew very little about the country. And I said, I know this is a long shot, but do you happen to have a 33-year-old film director in your country? And they said, yes, actually, she's our film commissioner. And it turned out that she not only was the film commissioner, she was the first film commissioner of Uzbekistan. She started the film commissioner, the whole film commissioner. Her whole goal is to bring foreign films to Uzbekistan to show off the landscapes and the culture, to put it on the big screen. And she was the director of the highest grossing film in Uzbek cinema history. And as a woman in Uzbekistan, that's actually a pretty big deal. So that was also another fascinating one.
Wow. These stories, but you could keep people up for probably 36 hours straight. You could do a telethon with these stories, and it's one after another. They're so different in the countries. So, Stephanie Gardner, thank you for joining us today and sharing so many inspiring stories. And to the viewers, I hope Stephanie's story resonates with you and proves the adage that nothing worthwhile comes easily. Stephanie, thanks so much for being today's guest.
Thank you, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman. To contact Marc, email him at info@lifestorieswithmarchoberman.com or visit him on social media through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Thank you for watching Life Stories with Marc Hoberman.